This girl was happily going to a big company for an interview, but when she just went up the stairs, her high heels accidentally slipped off and fell. The girl hurriedly ran down to the first floor to find her shoes and accidentally met a handsome guy. In his hand, he was still holding her high heels. J-Rim felt that this scene was so romantic, like a Cinderella story. Unexpectedly, the guy just opened his mouth and wanted to sue J-Rim for murder because this high heel had just fallen on his head. J-Rim initially thought she had met her prince, but she didn't expect this handsome guy to have such a mental problem. She didn't want to waste her precious time with this kind of person because her main purpose of coming here was not to apply for a job but to find a rich husband to change her life. Not long ago, J-Rim's father suddenly passed away. Before the father died, he left something in the drawer for his daughter. J-Rim thought her father left money, so she sneaked into his room, but unexpectedly, it was just a recruitment notice from Cheongdam Heaven. Her father also left a few lines on the back of the note. It turned out that he wanted her to go to this company to find a rich husband to change her life. Not only that, her father also left a huge debt and an unborn child. It turned out that J-Rim's stepmother was pregnant. That year, she and her father went to live with her stepmother. Before the two of them went there, her stepmother already had 2 daughters. Because J-Rim's family was unable to pay the debt, the court put their house up for auction. In the end, they had to rent a house outside because the house had too few rooms. J-Rim had to sleep in the same room with her sister. Her stepmother had to accept the risk of miscarriage to continue working, but then, she overworked herself and had to be hospitalized. While J-Rim was comforting her stepmother, she thought of the difficult days ahead. The stepmother was lying on the floor. J-Rim was holding the baby in his arms, while his sister Hua Jin was secretly eating the baby's milk powder. If things continued like this, J-Rim's whole family would starve sooner or later. At this time, J-Rim remembered the recruitment notice of Cheongdam Heaven, and she was determined to work here to marry a rich husband. When talking about Cheongdam Heaven, everyone couldn't help but mention the company representative, Moon Cha-min. He was a talented and handsome person, but his nerves seemed to be abnormal. At this time, the secretary reported that the company lost 200% last month. Hearing that, Cha-min immediately told the secretary that if he saw any employee's life was difficult, he should increase their salary by 10%. When J-Rim came to Cheongdam Heaven for an interview, she accidentally dropped a shoe on Cha-min's head, so he thought that J-Rim intended to murder him. Not only that, Cha-min also suspected that she was targeting his assets. When J-Rim heard Cha-min say that, she thought he was crazy. J-Rim didn't want to have anything to do with him, so she took the initiative to apologize and wanted to take back her high heels. But Cha-min refused her apology. He even thought that J-Rim intentionally threw the shoe at his head. Then J-Rim explained that it was because she was careless that she dropped the shoe on his head. But Cha-min thought that his luck was always good. He even insisted that J-Rim intentionally threw the shoe at his head. J-Rim felt that no matter what she said, Cha-min wouldn't believe it, so she took the initiative to explain what it meant to do it on purpose. She directly pushed him away. Then J-Rim hugged him tightly, which shocked Cha-min to the point of speechlessness. But J-Rim didn't expect that Cha-min was the representative of this company, and because of the misunderstanding just now, he refused J-Rim's interview opportunity. He even mocked her to be satisfied. Of course, J-Rim is not someone who can be bullied easily. She prayed that the thunder on a rainy day would hit Cha-min. Unexpectedly, there was thunder that night. Cha-min also saw J-Rim constantly cursing him, so he was so scared that he ran into the house. Then Cha-min remembered what happened this afternoon. He even smiled unconsciously. Actually, Cha-min always treated women like stones. He didn't care about love, but ever since Cha-min met J-Rim, a cold person like him began to change. He often imagined J-Rim, and she was no longer a stone in his eyes, but a very beautiful and charming girl. Cha-min wanted to stop himself from thinking about J-Rim, so he started exercising, but it was useless, because he still imagined her. Then Cha-min tried to sleep to relax, but he imagined J-Rim jumping on the bed. At this time he suspected that he had gone crazy. Because Cha-min wanted to find out who J-Rim was, he planned to let her join his company. When J-Rim received Cha-min's call, she still thought he was calling to cause trouble. Then Cha-min explained that he just wanted to invite her to work at the company. Although J-Rim didn't want to work with this crazy guy, because of money, she finally agreed to go to Cha-min's company. Next, J-Rim asked if today was their first day, but Cha-min thought that this was the first day they fell in love, so he couldn't help but blush. After Cha-min confirmed that J-Rim would join the company, he was secretly happy for a long time. At the same time, to welcome J-Rim's first day at the company, he started to take care of his appearance. Cha-min not only wore a gold necklace, but also tried on many tight pants, and finally chose a suit. But at this time, Cha-min was afraid that if he dressed too beautifully, J-Rim would fall in love with him, so he finally took out a gold belt, because he thought J-Rim would definitely hate this belt. Sure enough, Cha-min was really ridiculed by J-Rim for wearing that belt. She called it a chastity belt, because any man wearing it would make girls not want to get close to him. She also said that the chastity belt looked really good on him. Hearing that, Cha-min was so angry that she took off the belt on the spot. Next was the new employee introduction ceremony, after which Cha-min started to lead the pace. At this time, J-Rim still thought that there was a camera installed nearby, but the colleague next to her told her that this was a new employee welcoming ceremony. She just needed to say her dream. Everyone else wanted to live forever or marry a young husband, but J-Rim said that she wanted to become Cinderella. This statement made Cha-min misunderstand. He thought that she came here not to work but to get married. Then Jae-rim explained she just wanted to work and find a trustworthy person to marry. At this time, Cha-min saw that Jae-rim had many problems and wanted to fire her, but she wanted to keep this job, so Jae-rim used sincere words to express it. She promised that she would definitely work seriously. Then Cha-min proposed a bet with Jae-rim. If Jae-rim could win, she could stay and continue working. At the same time, he also let Jae-rim decide what to bet, but unexpectedly, she wanted to bet with him with Coke. What was even more surprising was that Jae-rim couldn't even open the Coke bottle, and she was teased by Cha-min. In the end, Jae-rim had to switch to arm wrestling, but unfortunately, she wasn't as strong as Cha-min. Even though she used all her strength, she couldn't move his wrist. Then Jae-rim used another trick. She intended to use both hands to defeat Cha-min, but she still couldn't move his wrist. At this time, Jae-rim accidentally saw that Cha-min's fingernails were flattened. She thought that she had hurt him when she arm wrestled earlier. Cha-min saw Jae-rim so worried. He explained that it was a wound from a fall when he was young. Perhaps this was the first time Cha-min felt someone else's sincerity, and at this moment he felt a little moved by Jae-rim. In order not to think too much, Cha-min suggested drinking Coke, and Jae-rim drank it without saying anything. When she had drunk half of it, suddenly a strong wind blew by. The scene at this moment was like a science fiction movie. After more than a minute, Jae-rim also finished drinking Coke. Then it was Cha-min's turn to drink. Perhaps because their Coke had magic, because Cha-min only drank a sip of Coke, and he sprayed out a lot of water. So Cha-min lost this confrontation. Thanks to that, Jae-rim was also able to stay and work. Because Jae-rim had just drunk too much Coke, when she was about to leave, she found herself about to pee her pants. At this time, Cha-min next to her also realized that something was different about her. In the end, Jae-rim had to say that she wanted to go to the bathroom, but both toilets were quite far away. At this time, Cha-min gave Jae-rim the umbrella that he always carried with her, and told her to use it to cover herself when going to the toilet. But Jae-rim thought that she was a good citizen, and she also told Cha-min to leave quickly. Seeing that Jae-rim was so determined, Cha-min had no choice but to carry her to the nearest toilet. When Jae-rim finished going to the toilet, she found that Cha-min was still waiting. Outside, she remembered the scene where he had just carried her to the toilet, and at this moment, Jae-rim felt a little moved by him. She still thought that Cha-min was a good person, but she immediately changed her mind. When Jae-rim and Cha-min were about to leave, a girl appeared. This girl not only called Cha-min honey, but she also said that he was her fiancé. Jae-rim had heard Cha-min say that he was someone who didn't want to get married before, but now his fiancé appeared here. At this time, Jae-rim couldn't tell if Cha-min was a good or bad person. She knew they were engaged, so she could only leave in disappointment. In fact, it was just a strategic engagement relationship. Cha-min and Dan-A had no feelings for each other, although the two were only engaged for cooperation. If Cha-min and Jae-rim had a love rumor, Dan-A's company would be affected. So Dan-A told Cha-min to maintain the strategic relationship and reminded him not to let Jae-rim's appearance affect their company. At this moment, Jae-rim had just returned home when she remembered the scene at noon when Cha-min carried her into the bathroom. She smiled and thought about his strong body. In another place, Cha-min also couldn't stop thinking about Jae-rim. He started to sit up and exercise to dispel his thoughts about her, but this method didn't work. He still remembered the scene where he took Jae-rim to the bathroom. She only said, "Oppa, hurry up," but he was completely robbed of his heart by her. The next day, Jae-rim accidentally met Cha-min on the way to work. Jae-rim was embarrassed and wanted to sneak away, but Cha-min teased Jae-rim and called her a bedwetter. He then made her apologize for yesterday's incident. Jae-rim said that she also wanted to apologize, but his fiancée suddenly appeared, so she forgot about it. Jae-rim then asked why Cha-min hid the fact that he was engaged. At this time, he thought that she liked him, so Cha-min confidently said that he couldn't like, but Jae-rim wasn't someone to be bullied, so she immediately mocked Cha-min as a liar. He said that he didn't believe in marriage, but in fact, he had secretly gotten engaged like a madman. When Jae-rim mentioned the word crazy, she remembered that Cha-min was her boss. In order to keep her current job, Jae-rim had to bow her head and apologize to him. Then she made it clear that she absolutely wouldn't hang out with crazy people. The two of them are really people who like to say things against their will. They clearly like each other, but refuse to admit it. While Jae-rim is working, Cha-min offers to train her privately, but just when they go to train, Dan-A sees Cha-min forcing Jae-rim to wash all the curtains. Even though Jae-rim knows Cha-min is taking revenge, she still has to endure it to repay his debt. While Jae-rim is doing the laundry, Dan-A approaches her and mentions her dream of marrying a rich man. At this point, Dan-A thinks that if Jae-rim wants to find a rich husband, she shouldn't work here, but should go to the temple to pray. Dan-A tells her that a manager spent $1,000,000 to pray, and soon she married a rich husband. After a long time, Jae-rim finally finished washing all the curtains. She turns on her phone to listen to music to improve her mood. Indeed, listening to music makes people happy. Jae-rim excitedly dances while drying the curtains. Cha-min is fascinated by her smile. He is completely captivated by her and can't resist. Out of curiosity, Cha-min approached and snatched Jae-rim's earphones to listen, but before he could listen for long, the phone automatically switched to the next video. What they didn't expect was that the earphones suddenly emitted shy sounds, and Jae-rim had to snatch the earphones back to avoid embarrassment. But just as she snatched the earphones, she accidentally fell. In the end, both of them fell down in an intimate position, and Jae-rim Rim's fall deepened their feelings. To ease the awkwardness, Chamin complimented her on how clean the curtains were, and Rim also took the opportunity to ask him to promote her to a full-time employee, but Chamin immediately refused. He also thought she was a dangerous person. Rim then gently told him that she was beneficial and not harmful. Faced with Rim's sweet trap, Chamin had to take out a basket and put it over Rim's head to keep her quiet. When he left, he emphasized that Rim was a dangerous person, which made her very angry. In the evening, Rim walked home. After a hard day's work, she was very tired, but Chamin came to mock Rim, saying that she did a good job. Then he asked her to clean the balls in the pool tomorrow. Chamin's words made Rim mad again, and the idea of quitting her job popped into her head. Then Rim received a thank you message from her uncle for paying off her debt. At this point, she felt that her salary, which was only enough to pay off her debt, was not very useful. Then Rim remembered the wishing shrine that Dan A mentioned, that just 1,000,000 won could change her life. Rim actually went to the wishing shrine to pray. She told the female shaman that she wanted a rich husband. The next day, Chamin agreed to let Rim become a full-time employee. At this time, she was not only happy but also bewildered and asked the reason. But Chamin thought that even if Rim became a full-time employee, she would not necessarily find a rich husband. Rim felt offended and went up to threaten him. Perhaps because she was standing too close, Chamin was once again enchanted. To control his emotions, Chamin not only told her to stay away, but he also said that her hair had a strange smell. Rim believed what he said was true, so she used a toilet deodorant bar on herself. Then Rim asked her coworker if she had body odor. Maybe her coworker smelled the toilet, so he said that she was blind, and that was because she did not shower. Then Rim remembered what the female shaman said last night. She just needed to write her wish on a piece of paper. When she was free, she could take it out and look at it and make a wish again, and those wishes would come true. Perhaps her sincerity moved the heavens. Just as Rim was making a wish, a man appeared outside. A strong wind blew her wish paper to the other person's side. This man was not only tall but also very handsome. At this moment, Rim could feel his abs, but just as she was laughing, Chamin saw this scene from behind. He had a rival. At this moment, Rim was sure that this handsome guy was her future husband. Then, this man named Do Hong saw the first sentence of the wish. Rim was afraid that he would see the content behind, so she snatched the paper back. But just as she snatched it back, she accidentally dropped Do Hong's button. Rim quickly apologized, afraid that Do Hong would be angry with her. Unexpectedly, he did not blame her, but was very polite and said it was okay. Then, Do Hong took out a needle and thread to sew the button back. He licked the thread once. Then he used one eye to aim and thread the needle. With just those two actions, Rim was completely infatuated with him. Then the colleague took the initiative to greet Do Hong, but Rim didn't want to miss this man, so she called her colleague out to talk. While the two of them were talking, Chamin took the initiative to walk towards Do Hong. Chamin remembered the moment Rim had feelings for Do Hong. This time, Chamin was jealous. He wanted to chase Do Hong away immediately. Chamin shot lightning at him. These lightnings seemed to be telling Do Hong that he shouldn't touch Chamin's woman. When Rim turned around, she thought Chamin was going to greet Do Hong, so she called Chamin director. Only then did Do Hong realize that the man in front of her was the representative of this company. Then Chamin suggested that another colleague entertain Do Hong, but Rim thought that Chamin broke his promise because yesterday he agreed to let her become an official employee. Unexpectedly, Do Hong suggested that Rim entertain him, and he pointed out that he and she already knew each other. In the end, Chamin had to let Rim entertain Do Hong. After that, Do Hong not only introduced himself as the youngest director to win the award, but he also asked Rim about the conditions to become a member. But Rim regretfully announced that the membership was full, and if Do Hong wanted to join, she needed an invitation from a VIP customer. Do Hong felt sorry and was about to leave, but Rim didn't want to miss the man in front of her, so she kept him. Rim also said that she could make an exception to let him become a member, and then she asked Chamin's permission to let Do Hong become a member. But Chamin thought that he was just an ordinary person, so Chamin flatly refused her request. Rim reluctantly revealed Do Hong's identity as a director. Dan A, who was standing next to him, also felt that letting the director become a member was beneficial to the company. Chamin saw Rim's determination, so he finally agreed to let Do Hong become a member. When Rim sent Do Hong off, Chamin deliberately followed behind them. Because he was standing too close to Rim, Chamin's heart beat faster. Then he not only said that she smelled strange, but he also pushed her towards Do Hong. When Chamin saw Do Hong supporting Rim again, he was so angry that she couldn't speak. Then Do Hong not only praised Rim for her good scent, but he also helped her fix her hair on her face. At this time, Chamin felt very regretful about pushing Rim just now. Do Hong was very good at talking. Before leaving, he not only gave Rim a candy, but also made an appointment to meet her at the new member party this weekend. In order to prevent Rim from attending Do Hong's party, Chamin deliberately assigned her an important project. He asked her to nail and hang new paintings. These paintings must be related to the theme of mistaken encounters. When Rim completed this task, she could attend the party. Then Chamin gave her the artist's business card. But Rim always felt that drawing was not simple, so she asked Chamin to change her task. Chamin was afraid that she would fall in love with Rim, so he stopped her. In the end, Rim had to accept this task. Rim asked the artist to complete the painting before the weekend. weekend, but the artist said that this painting would take a lot of time, so he refused her request. But Jae-rim was smart. She only used a few words to convince the artist to speed up progress. The next day, they completed many works, but at this time, Jae-rim received a phone call. The other party said that the artist had run away. When Jae-rim found the artist, he suggested giving up his career as an artist. Jae-rim then advised him that even if he was tired, he should not give up his dream or he would regret it for the rest of his life. In fact, Jae-rim used to be a talented painter. Because she did not have money to pay for her tuition, she had to give up her dream. After Jae-rim's advice, the painter still insisted on giving up painting, so Jae-rim had to finish the painting herself. The next day, Chamin also found it hard to believe that Jae-rim had completed tasks. In the end, Chamin agreed to let her go to the party. Then he told her to quickly find a husband and leave the company. At this time, Jae-rim still thought he hated her, so he told her to leave, but in fact he was afraid that if she stayed, he would not be able to control himself and fall in love with her. Then Chamin told Jae-rim to dress up a little to go to the party. He also reminded her not to let her dress up affect her finding a good husband. As a result, Jae-rim just appeared and made Chamin fascinated. At this time, in his eyes, there was only her, but unfortunately, in Jae-rim's eyes, there was only Do-hong. She quietly walked to Do-hong's side. Chamin was angry and could only drink water to hide her emotions. Then Jae-rim and Do-hong went to another table to greet everyone. When Do-hong heard that the girl named Ga-young was the daughter of the representative of Unsan Electronic, he immediately showed an unusual expression. Then Ga-young asked Do-hong who invited him to become a member of the group. Meanwhile, Dan-a next to her said that because of Jae-rim's introduction, Cha-min let Do-hong become a member. Ga-young continued to ask about the relationship between Do-hong and Jae-rim, but Do-hong said that he had only met Jae-rim once and they had no relationship. When Jae-rim saw Do-hong's answer, she had to smile awkwardly, but Ga-young realized that Jae-rim wanted to marry a rich man, so he was so active. Young then mocked Jae-rim that if Jae-rim needed money, she could come to her company to work, but for the sake of dignity, Jae-rim refused outright and said that she wanted to work here to continue to make Jae-rim lose face. Ga-young told Jae-rim to get her a glass of water because Jae-rim was an employee here. She had to bring drinks to the guests, but when Jae-rim brought a cup of mint chocolate, Ga-young complained that the drink was not delicious and pushed Jae-rim away. Out of natural reflex, when Jae-rim fell down, she grabbed Ga-young's hand tightly, and in the end, both of them fell to the ground. At this time, Do-hong gave Ga-young a handkerchief and helped her up. What was even more surprising was that Do-hong said it was Jae-rim's fault. At this moment, Jae-rim understood everything. It was because she mistook Do-hong for her future husband, and she also knew that his purpose in approaching her was just to join the club. Then Do-hong pretended to be kind and helped Jae-rim up, but at the last moment, Cha-min pushed Do-hong's hand away. Cha-min reached out to help Jae-rim up. Jae-rim didn't hesitate to grab Cha-min's hand. Although Dan-a and Cha-min were just strategic partners, they really didn't have any feelings for each other. But everyone knew that Dan-a was Cha-min's fiancé, so Cha-min's actions were like ruining Dan-a's reputation. Dan-a was extremely angry and slapped him. After Dan-a left, Cha-min put a coat on Jae-rim in front of Do-hong. Cha-min even held her hand and left in front of Do-hong, making Do-hong furious. Then Jae-rim signaled Cha-min to ask how Dan-a was doing. Jae-rim said that she was fine, so he didn't need to worry. When Cha-min left, he told Jae-rim about the marriage of convenience. He also told her that there was no love between him and Dan-a. Cha-min chased after Dan-a into the lobby. Then he asked why she had slapped him. Dan-a said that she couldn't stand the way Cha-min cared about Jae-rim. Cha-min told Dan-a not to come here anymore because he insisted that he would always care about Jae-rim. These two sentences made Dan-a angry and had to leave. Actually, when Dan-a said that she cared about Cha-min, it meant that she also liked him. Later, Cha-min met Do-hong in the bathroom. Do-hong warned him not to contact someone like Jae-rim, otherwise Cha-min would disrupt the social order. Do-hong asked Cha-min if he liked Jae-rim, but Cha-min didn't easily reveal the answer. He directly pressed Do-hong against the wall. Cha-min also asked him if he liked her. Then Cha-min warned Do-hong not to guess his thoughts because they were not the same kind of people. On the other side, Jae-rim apologized to Ga-young for spilling the milk tea, but she said that only poor people should apologize, and that someone with power and influence like her would never apologize. Ga-young also mocked Jae-rim that no matter how hard Jae-rim tried, he could not change his poor status. Then Do-hong went to their table again. Now when Jae-rim saw Do-hong, she remembered the scene where he gave Ga-young a handkerchief and Do-hong blamed her. In the end, Jae-rim sadly left. Jae-rim also thought that she could not change her poor status. She also realized that her dream of marrying a rich man was just a joke. When Jae-rim was about to cry, Cha-min asked her if she needed help. Jae-rim remembered Ga-young's mockery. Perhaps Jae-rim wanted to regain face in front of Ga-young, so she leaned on Cha-min. Maybe Cha-min also wanted to tell Do-hong not to touch his woman. In the end, Cha-min kissed Jae-rim on the lips. This kiss not only surprised everyone, but also made Do-hong mad. Jae-rim also did not expect Cha-min to actually kiss her. Jae-rim was angry. She clearly just wanted them to pretend to be intimate, but did not expect Cha-min to actually kiss her. Cha-min said that she was the one who took the initiative, and he was just helping her a little. Jae-rim felt that she could not argue, so she had to leave first. Even though Jae-rim was angry with Cha-min, she was still smiling happily on the way home. Elsewhere, Cha-min also had hallucinations because of the kiss just now. The next day, the two met again at the company. To reduce the awkwardness, Jae-rim took the initiative initiative to say hello. Chamin immediately said that he would not mind what happened last night. He also told Jae-rim to relax. She was unhappy when she heard that Chamin didn't care, and she also told him that she didn't care about these things. She treated this like eating a sea cucumber. Chamin heard about sea cucumbers and thought she was a treasure, but unexpectedly, the sea cucumber that Jae-rim mentioned meant malnutrition, and she could throw it away at will. Then Do-hong came to flirt with Jae-rim, which caused her to accidentally get burned. Seeing this, Do-hong immediately helped Jae-rim treat the wound and asked about the relationship between Chamin and her. When Jae-rim heard Chamin's name, she unconsciously let go of Do-hong's hand. She told Do-hong that she and Chamin were just a boss and employee relationship. When Do-hong heard this, she asked Jae-rim to visit her office next time, and then he helped her put on a hairpin. Do-hong said that the hairpin was considered an invitation. Her colleague said that Chamin had been very interested in Jae-rim's affairs recently, and he even thought that Chamin liked her. But Jae-rim thought that Chamin did everything just to get her to leave the company soon. Then her colleagues thought that Jae-rim could test whether Chamin really liked her or not. Jae-rim wanted to know Chamin's feelings, so she conducted a test. When she just entered Chamin's office, he discovered that Jae-rim had an extra hairpin on her head. She also did not hide the fact that Do-hong asked her to come to the office. Chamin knew that they wanted to go to the office together, so he could not sit still. He also asked Jae-rim if she agreed with Do-hong. Jae-rim continued to want to test him, so she replied that she agreed. Jae-rim's answer immediately made Chamin show a dissatisfied expression. Then she came in front of Chamin and asked to kiss Chamin again. Jae-rim slowly moved her lips closer to him. She found that he did not refuse and closed his eyes. To continue the experiment, Jae-rim decided to kiss her for real, but at the last minute, Chamin sobered up and pushed Jae-rim away. Then he told her to prepare carefully and went to Do-hong's office. Jae-rim asked if he really wanted her to do that, but Chamin still nodded in confirmation. He also took Jae-rim to choose clothes. Chamin's actions made Jae-rim think that he really wanted her to go. Jae-rim wanted to leave the store, but she was pulled back by Chamin and asked why. Jae-rim said that she was beautiful enough, so she didn't need these things. But Chamin said that a good impression was what made Do-hong like her. It was this sentence that made Jae-rim certain that he didn't like her. Then Jae-rim tried on many clothes, but Chamin criticized everyone she wore. He even thought that this style didn't suit her, but Chamin still bought all the clothes he had just tried on for Jae-rim. So many that the taxi almost couldn't hold them all. Finally, he left a sentence on a piece of paper. Chamin wanted Jae-rim to wear the most beautiful style for him to see. Chamin is really mean. He deliberately let Jae-rim wear inappropriate clothes to meet Do-hong. The next day, Jae-rim was invited to Do-hong's office. Then he took out a script and asked her to draw the scene. Do-hong said that when they are together, they must do what they like. Jae-rim suddenly remembered that Chamin had also said these words. Do-hong was unhappy when she mentioned another man. He pulled Jae-rim towards him. He told her not to mention Chamin in front of him in the future, and Do-hong told Jae-rim that he liked her. Elsewhere, Chamin heard information from a colleague. He knew that Do-hong was not a good person. Do-hong often went to dance clubs with beautiful girls. Chamin was worried that something would happen to Jae-rim, so he hurried to Do-hong's office. Do-hong wanted to kiss Jae-rim, but at the moment, she was only thinking about kissing Chamin. When they were about to kiss, they suddenly heard a stomach growl, which made Do-hong stop his actions. Then a man suddenly appeared in the room. It turned out that this person was Do-hong's brother. His purpose in coming here was to ask Do-hong for money. Do-hong was afraid that his brother would embarrass him in front of Jae-rim, so he quickly told his brother to go out, but his brother refused to go out. He even took out a red book and placed it in front of Jae-rim. He said that Do-hong earned a large sum of money by writing this book and used that money to pretend to be a director. Do-hong thought Jae-rim would scold him for being a scammer, but unexpectedly she didn't scold him, but she also defended him in front of her brother. Jae-rim saw that Do-hong relied on his own abilities to make money, which was not wrong. On the contrary, seeing his brother taking advantage of his younger brother's weakness to cheat money was the problem. Do-hong felt that his brother had embarrassed him in front of Jae-rim, so Do-hong kicked his brother out. Do-hong then apologized for deceiving Jae-rim and asked her not to tell Cheongdam-heaven about this. Jae-rim asked in surprise why. Since Cheongdam-heaven only accepts outstanding people, Do-hong was afraid that if Cheongdam-heaven found out about this, they would revoke his membership. In the end, Jae-rim not only agreed to his request, but she also helped Do-hong learn to accept himself. Jae-rim then wiped the dust off his book. When she gave the book back to Do-hong, she said that he was an outstanding person. Do-hong may have just wanted to use Jae-rim at first, but looking at Do-hong's expression now, he probably fell completely in love with Jae-rim. Chamin finally waited for Jae-rim to come down, and he immediately called her. He was very worried and wanted to know what happened in the office, but Jae-rim didn't understand Chamin's actions. It was clear that Chamin pushed her to Do-hong, but now he called to find her. Because Chamin made Jae-rim too tired, she hung up. Chamin was very confused when Jae-rim hung up. The next day,